You won't hear it on the news. You won't see it trending on social media. But a quiet storm is brewing in the global economy, and Warren Buffett, one of the most respected investors in history, has already spotted it. The United States is on the verge of making a critical mistake, a mistake that won't just impact their economy. It will ripple across the world, affecting everything from fuel prices to job security to the money in your pocket. And while governments distract us with reassuring headlines, Buffett pays attention to what really matters, the hidden signals that come before the crash. That's why what he just pointed out might be one of the most important economic warnings of our time. Before we go deeper, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you're someone who wants to protect your money, understand the real forces shaping the world, and avoid financial traps that could cost you years of progress, this is a space for you. Subscribe, hit that like button, and stay informed with content that goes straight to the point. Now, back to what matters. Buffett doesn't scream. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply observes and acts with precision. And what he's observing now is a dangerous pattern. Trade being weaponized, tariffs rising, investors pulling out, policies being enacted not to prevent collapse, but to accelerate it. He's seen this movie before. But this time, the ending could be far worse. Using trade as a tool of retaliation may seem like strength, but Buffett warns it's more like steering with a cannon instead of a wheel. It looks powerful, but ends in disaster at the first sharp turn. When a government begins to impose tariffs to punish another nation, it doesn't punish the enemy. It punishes its own people. Food gets more expensive. Fuel prices rise. Even your phone costs more. And soon, businesses start to hesitate. Expansion plans stall. Jobs disappear. It's not about politics. It's about patterns. Remember when the U.S. escalated tariffs against China? Within months, American farmers lost contracts. Companies saw their products pile up unsold, and financial markets trembled. Buffett knows the world cannot afford a second Cold War disguised as a trade dispute. What begins with tariffs often ends with tanks, and sometimes those tanks aren't just metaphors. Tariffs are seductive. They look like solutions. They sound patriotic. But Buffett calls them what they truly are, hidden taxes. When a foreign product is taxed, its price rises. Local competitors see an opportunity and raise their prices too. The result? Everyone pays more, and no one really understands why. But it doesn't stop there. Business owners, especially those who rely on imported raw materials or technology, start rethinking their future. Should they still build that new factory? Hire more workers? Expand? Often the answer is no. And that's how fear, not failure, begins to freeze an economy. Buffett compares this to treating liver disease with painkillers. It may relieve the discomfort briefly, but it makes the long-term illness worse. The economy thrives on predictability. When tariffs are unpredictable, it creates an environment where innovation dies, expansion halts, and growth becomes a distant dream. He illustrates this with a real-world example. Benjamin Moore, a Berkshire Hathaway company. When steel tariffs hit, the cost of making paint cans surged. Sounds small, right? But that extra cost echoed through the supply chain like falling dominoes. Higher can prices led to higher paint prices. So a small grocery store decides not to repaint its storefront. A local painter loses work. And just like that, a tariff on steel leads to unemployment across town. This is what Buffett calls a silent domino effect, where a tiny change in cost becomes a landslide of economic consequences. And it's not just paint. It's car parts, food packaging, everyday appliances, anything that uses aluminum or steel. The consumer doesn't see the blow coming, but feels it every time they check out at the store. Warren Buffett understands. The true cost of a tariff isn't in the headline. It's on your receipt. But perhaps even more dangerous are the second-order effects, those invisible cracks that form beneath the surface. A tariff that causes uncertainty won't make the evening news, but it will make a factory owner hesitate. And when the business community hesitates, the economic will begin to jam. Imagine being a business owner, ready to expand, to hire, to build. Then, suddenly, the rules change. New tariffs are introduced. Do you invest or wait? Most wait, and it's in that pause, that silence, where crisis begins. A delayed project here, a canceled hire there. Before anyone notices, unemployment is rising and the system begins to crack. Buffett has watched it happen before, and he warns, the most dangerous effects are always the quietest. When America imposes tariffs, countries like China don't sit quietly. They respond, typically by devaluing their currency. It's a classic move. By making the yuan cheaper, Chinese exports stay competitive despite the tariffs. But that move unleashes something far worse, a currency war. And no one wins a currency war. Each nation scrambles to protect itself by pushing the cost onto others. Imports get more expensive. Inflation spikes. Salaries lose value. The people suffer. Buffett compares it to pouring gasoline on a fire. It might work short-term, but long-term, it burns everything. When a currency weakens, everything changes. The cost of bread rises. Rent goes up. Essentials become luxuries. People who are already struggling find themselves drowning. And it's not just a China, U.S. problem. Emerging economies like Brazil are often the first to feel the aftershock. One wrong move on the global chessboard and their currencies collapse. Exports dry up. Investment flees. And once again, the common citizen pays the price. Confidence is oxygen in the financial markets. You only notice it when it's gone. And Buffett never stops reminding us. Investors hate uncertainty. When they see governments making erratic decisions, poorly planned tariffs, currency manipulation, they retreat. Quietly, but decisively, they pull money from what used to be the safest asset in the world, U.S. government bonds. Now stop and think. If even U.S. Treasury bonds no longer feel safe to global investors, what happens next? Warren Buffett has seen this too. As trust vanishes, the U.S. is forced to offer higher interest rates to attract investors. That means more debt, more strain, and a heavier burden for future generations. And that burden, it trickles down to you. Higher rates mean higher loan costs, higher mortgages, more expensive credit. Want to buy a house? The bank charges more. Start a business? Your interest payments are higher. And all of it traces back to bad decisions made at the top. Because when capital starts fleeing the U.S., it's not just Wall Street that suffers. It's your street, your job, your family. Trust is slow to build, but it vanishes in an instant. And the price of that moment could be the collapse of an entire generation's financial future. And here's something most people overlook. When investors demand higher returns to lend money to the U.S., the government spends more on interest and less on everything else, like schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. Buffett uses a simple metaphor. It's like a family drowning in credit card debt with no money left to fix a leaking roof. The problem isn't just the debt. It's what that debt prevents you from doing. Right now, a huge portion of America's federal budget is already going just to pay interest. And if investor trust continues to shrink, that number will only grow. Buffett warns, we're so busy putting out fires that we're ignoring the fact that the house is collapsing. And you feel it when your local school has no teachers, when your hospital lacks medicine, when every promise sounds like a lie, all because leaders chose short-term optics over long-term vision. If this part of the video resonated with you, tell us what you think in the comments. Do you see signs of this happening where you live? And if you know someone who should hear this message, send this video their way. Sharing it might help them prepare before it's too late. When Warren Buffett looks at debt, he doesn't just see numbers. He sees priorities. And today, the numbers are screaming that the world's largest economy is failing to prioritize its future. The U.S. is now spending an alarming share of its budget just to pay interest on the national debt. And that's before we even talk about healthcare, education, infrastructure, or emergency preparedness. In Buffett's words, every dollar spent on interest is a dollar we're not investing in progress. It's like living in a house where every paycheck goes to loan sharks. There's no money left to fix the roof when it leaks or to feed your kids when they're hungry. And yet, leaders continue to act as if everything is fine. They celebrate stock market highs while ignoring the crumbling foundation beneath their feet. But Buffett isn't fooled by appearances. He warns that the greatest threat isn't just bad decisions. It's the compounding effect of those decisions over time. Every missed opportunity to invest in innovation, education, and sustainability comes back as a much bigger cost later. And the real tragedy? That cost isn't just economic. It's generational. When schools underfund teachers, when hospitals run out of supplies, when entire communities are left behind in the name of balancing books, they don't bounce back overnight. The damage lasts decades. Warren Buffett is a forward thinker, but he never forgets the past. That's why he often brings up a pivotal moment in American history. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of the 1930s. Promoted as a patriotic move to save American jobs, it triggered a global trade collapse that deepened the Great Depression and fractured international alliances. What followed? World War II. Now, let that sink in. A single piece of legislation, driven by short-term fear and political pressure, helped ignite the greatest conflict in modern history. That's not exaggeration. That's historical cause and effect. Buffett's point is simple but sobering. When nations abandon cooperation and embrace isolation, they don't just weaken trade, they weaken peace. And today, with the world more interconnected and more armed than ever before, one misstep, one careless tariff, one provocation, could do more than disrupt markets. It could spark irreversible conflict. Economic policy is no longer just about growth. It's about survival. That's why Buffett warns against unilateral aggression disguised as economic nationalism. Tariffs might win political points, but they lose global trust. And trust, once broken, takes years, sometimes generations, to repair. When international collaboration falls apart, humanity is left exposed. Climate change, pandemics, hunger. These are not challenges any one country can solve alone. But if the bonds of trust dissolve, collective solutions vanish. And so does the hope of navigating global crises. Buffett isn't sounding the alarm for headlines. He's offering a strategic warning. The world has seen what happens when pride replaces prudence, and the tools of trade are turned into weapons. It doesn't end well. But amid all this darkness, Buffett doesn't preach despair. He teaches preparation. His advice? Invest only in what you understand. In times of economic turmoil, the most dangerous thing you can do is chase fads or jump into the next big thing because it's trending on social media. That's how fortunes are lost. Instead, Buffett advocates for something radical in today's world: patience. He invests in real businesses. Businesses with strong fundamentals. Businesses that provide value, especially during difficult times. Think Coca-Cola, Apple, Johnson & Johnson. These are companies that don't just survive crises. They thrive through them. Buffett says it clearly. If you don't understand how a company makes money, you shouldn't invest in it. It's not about genius. It's about common sense. And that common sense is rare in a world addicted to instant gratification. Rather than betting on hype, Buffett studies essential sectors: energy, food, sanitation. Things people still need when money gets tight. Things that remain steady when the world turns chaotic. This isn't boring investing. It's crisis-proof investing. He looks for value, not noise. He waits for discounts. And when the right moment comes, he moves. That's why he wins while others panic. Because the money game isn't about speed. It's about wisdom. And the good news? Wisdom can be learned if you're willing to look deeper and think longer. You see, most people only react. Buffett prepares. While others scramble, he positions himself. While others fear the storm, he learns how to sail in it. So let's be honest. After everything you've heard so far, are you still relying on headlines? Or are you ready to think like Buffett? The difference between those who sink in a crisis and those who rise isn't luck. It's information. And now you have it. So what will you do with it? If you've been feeling like the world is getting more unstable, more unpredictable, you're not wrong. You're just finally seeing what Buffett saw long ago, that when people in power lose their compass, the fallout always reaches those at the bottom first. Ask yourself, 5 years from now, will you be proud of the decisions you made today or regret what you ignored? If this message connected with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below with your thoughts. What changes are you making to protect yourself? Let's keep the conversation going, because sometimes the most powerful preparation begins with a simple reflection. Even after revealing all these economic red flags, Warren Buffett continues to repeat a lesson that sounds simple, but is profoundly powerful. Invest in what you understand. In moments of panic, this principle becomes even more valuable. When the media shouts crisis, when markets swing wildly, and when the average person feels lost in financial noise, the temptation is to grab onto whatever seems like a solution. Anything that promises quick returns or instant rescue. But Buffett urges us to resist that urge. Why? Because panic destroys clarity, and clarity is what protects you. In the rush to escape uncertainty, many people run straight into risk. They pour their savings into cryptocurrencies they don't understand, into startups they never researched, or into online gurus selling the illusion of easy wealth. Buffett doesn't play that game. Instead, he returns to fundamentals. Look for businesses that create real value, products people will keep buying no matter what, services that will remain relevant, even during storms. Think of it like this. No matter the crisis, people still drink beverages, use electricity, need medicine, and clean their homes. These sectors offer resilience, and resilience is what builds lasting wealth. Buffett's favorite investments are boring to most people, and that's the point, because the crowd is often wrong. The crowd chases flash. Buffett seeks substance, and when it comes to timing, he waits. He buys great companies when they're undervalued. When fear drives prices down, he steps in, not because he knows the future, but because he knows the business. He invests not in hype, but in logic. And here's where it gets interesting. Most amateur investors focus on short-term price changes. Buffett focuses on long-term performance. He asks, will this business still be around and growing 10, 20, 30 years from now? If the answer is yes, and if the price is fair, he invests. That mindset requires discipline. It requires patience. But most of all, it requires the ability to think independently. And that, Buffett says, is rare. Now, let's step out of the investor mindset for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Buffett's warnings about tariffs, debt, and economic instability aren't just for economists. They're a signal to everyone. Protect your household economy. Don't assume things will go back to normal. Don't bet on someone else fixing the system for you. It starts with small actions. Reevaluate where your money is going. Are you investing in things that grow or things that disappear? Learn about the companies you support. Understand the difference between spending and investing. Build an emergency fund. Diversify your income sources. And above all, educate yourself. Not with flashy trends, but with timeless knowledge. The kind of knowledge that helped Buffett turn a childhood paper route into one of the most respected financial empires on earth. Because in a world full of noise, truth has never been more valuable. Buffett often says, you don't have to be smarter than the rest. You just have to be more disciplined than the rest. So if you're serious about protecting and multiplying your money, don't wait for the storm to pass. Start building your shelter now. Start studying what others overlook. Start seeing risk as a teacher, not a threat. The future belongs to those who prepare, not those who pretend nothing's wrong. And here's something worth doing right now. Make sure you're actually subscribed to this channel. You'd be surprised how many people watch the videos, learn from them, but forget to hit that subscribe button. Check now. Turn on notifications. And don't miss the next insight that could help you stay one step ahead when the world shifts again. Because in the money game, the most expensive thing you can do is delay action. One decision today could change everything tomorrow. So let's close with this. What are you going to do differently after hearing all this? Leave your answer in the comments. Share this message with someone who needs clarity in a world full of confusion. And remember, while others panic, you can prepare. You can think like Buffett, and that changes everything.